Hello, everyone. So happy to be here. My name is João Carreiro. All right. So Gaui Venter has been the name I've been using in the last few years since I decided to be a freelance consultant in product innovation and design. My professional career, just to talk a bit about myself, I guess started in 2002. I was studying electrotechnical engineering. I opened a company, very little ambition. I basically did gaming computers for friends, family. The main objective was to pay for tuition, alcohol, and traveling. So that went quite well until I had to make a decision of making it more serious or giving up on it, because the market dynamics change. So when before I could have 30 to 50% of margin in every computer I sold, so selling 2 or 3 per month was completely fine to pay the bills. With more intermediaries and distributors in the mix, that didn't work anymore. So I decided to take it serious. And the company went to electronic security, home automation, eventually homeland security. It was a long path. It lasted more than 10 years. After these 10 years, I started being an executive, and then it closed down eventually. Around 2011, with the real estate crisis hitting Portugal, I lost 80% of my recurring revenue from one year to the other, so it was pretty tough. And it was at that time that I decided to open a startup. And that startup was called Nozomi. At the time, I was in Japan doing an interrail when we got the yes from our first round investors. We had to pick a name. We didn't thought about it. In retrospective, maybe we should have went that better. So bullet trains in Japan, they're called Shinkansen, and one of the fastest ones, it's called Nozomi. Nozomi means in Japanese hope, wish for a better future. So name of bullet train, technology made sense. At Nozomi, we did hardware products. Our flagship one was a small black box that transmitted encrypted audio and video over 4G networks. At the time, it was the smallest, most energy efficient, and running a web server inside of it, which was unheard of in the industry. And it was basically used, as you can imagine, it was used hidden by police officers and intelligence officers. We sold to North America, so we had meetings with the FBI, the CIA. We sold a couple of units, so it was interesting, but in the end we couldn't scale. One thing we didn't do at the time was, when we Googled Nozomi, was click on the button images, or else we would have found this. It's not as bad as it seems. It's just a very common feminine name in Japan. So it's not a porn star, it could be. And how well did that startup go? Well, not very well. This was what I was eating at dinner in the last couple of weeks before it closed down, trying to have money to pay the rest of the salaries. So eventually it went belly up. At the time, I had this thing that I said reasonably often, that I hated consultants. I always thought they costed too much money for the value they delivered. I had to change that to I hate strategy consultants, because I've kind of became one. So the irony on that. More irony is that I married a strategy consultant, so I had to change that again to I hate strategy consultants except my amazing wife. In the meantime, I've been doing this for big corporates, as you can see, and a lot of startups. And for startups, I do it sometimes for free, if they're very early stage. And just before we move to the actual masterclass in product, these are some of my favorites. The list is longer than this. These are just the ones I keep going back to. You will see a trend. There's a clear trend of things that I keep trying to do and keep failing at, and I wish to go back to them. What I guess brought me here in front of you today was a B2C marketplace I did a couple of years back. It started from a concept on a piece of paper, and then it went from concept to launch in 12 months. For the ones from Portugal here, it's called Pisca Pisca. After 12 months, we launched. It may seem like a lot for the startup people here, but remember, it was done inside a very regulated and corporate environment of a bank. So it was quite good in my own opinion. 3 months after launch, we had 20% of market share in terms of demand, and 18 months after that, we were the biggest one in Portugal in terms of offer of used cars. So the bank was quite happy. I left after this. I understood a couple of years back that I'm not a corporate person, so I enjoyed the trip and I moved on. So again, I'm here to talk about product design, not product management. Although, in essence, product management should have product design along the way, and product design kind of has project management on the essence of it. It's more about the human experience, user experience, and as the Nielsen Normal Group says, it's a mix of actually, in my opinion, everything that happens inside the company, being it marketing, sales, everything influences the experience, so everything influences the product. But if we take it down to a more simpler level, in my opinion, we have 3 pillars. We have business, design, and technology. And on the business side, it's what drives the vision, the dream. But we are really trying to make it viable. Being a startup or a big corporate, when we talk business, what we are fighting for is that it's sustainable enough that they let us play with the product and make it great. When we're talking about technology, we obviously go after functionality and performance, but in the end, we want it to be feasible. So we probably came with big dreams from the business side, from the research side, and then we need to find out how can we make this feasible step by step of the way. And on the design side, design is all about usefulness, usability. But I strongly believe that if a product is not desirable, it's not possible to have a great product if it's not desirable. And I deep down think and believe that even if it's a boring SaaS product, B2B, or even if it's an internal tool for the company, if people don't feel a tiny bit of pleasure using it, it's basically bad. So if you do all this, if you mix all this together in a good way, eventually you're going to get to something called, I don't know, it's user experience basically, but since I want to give it a positive notch, I call it user experience innovation. And how do you do this? How do you do all this in a way that it's scalable? It's kind of a roadmap, right? And it's obviously magic. No, it's not. So it's a process. I guess most of you heard about design thinking. I mean, fancy word, but in reality, great for IDEO to put it on top of the world. But design thinking is just using a design process to do things. And the design process is something that exists since, I don't know, the Stone Age. Because it's basically, you have a problem to solve, like you want to cut something, you pick up a rock, you try it out, it's not sharp enough, you try to make it sharp, you try again, it's better. Someone comes up and says, why don't you attach a stick to the rock? It's easier to pick up and cut stuff. That's product design. It's basically deal with iterations, deal with validation, keep improving the product step by step. So, in my opinion, this is the framework that I kind of think fits most cases in terms of startups and corporates. You start with a challenge, you broaden the scope, and try to understand everything around the challenge you have. You narrow it down, trying to define a vision and a strategy for what you want to accomplish. You broaden the scope again, trying to prototype. For me, it's really important when I prototype for the first time, I try to dream big and prototype the perfect solution, even if technically it's going to be probably unfeasible to do. I like to start by testing and validating the perfect solution, and then I'll try to see what I can accomplish or not with the business constraints. And then you validate, and eventually you get, again, a good product or innovation. You're gonna spin a lot, especially on the last step. All this is recurring, so you shouldn't do this once and stop there. You don't just research and then define and then prototype and then validate and you're done. No, you're gonna learn stuff that will make you go back and forward. But particularly in the prototyping phase, you're never gonna prototype it right the first time. So that's a point where you're gonna spend some time iterating. It's all about, on the left side, doing the right thing, and on the right side, doing the thing right. So trying to give you a bit of a roadmap on how can you start doing this if you've never done it before, especially. Very talked about personas. So when you start a project like this, you normally don't start with personas, you start with proto-personas. And why are they called proto-personas? Because you're drawing them up. Like, you need to interview people, you need to observe people, and to do that, you need some kind of first opinion on who you're going to search to interview, right? So those are proto-personas, mainly because they're heavily biased in your own opinions and beliefs and your personal experience. Then after the first couple of interviews and groundwork, you're going to have a clearer image of your personas, and then you evolve to that. And then after you have personas, those will be the core of everything you do from then on. Everything you do, you should go back to the personas, have them printed on a wall around your workspace, and keep looking at them and seeing, are the questions you're asking and the answers you're trying to perceive, they still make sense to the personas that you defined a couple of weeks ago? It's very easy to go off track. Like, we get enthusiastic, people say stuff on workshops that are like, whoa, this is amazing, and then you look at the wall and are like, yeah, it's amazing, but that persona wouldn't use that. So that's really important. And you have a bunch of exercises to do the understanding phase. You can benchmark, you can do interviews, ethnographic studies, discovery workshops. I mean, if you Google discovery workshops, design thinking, you're going to get dozens of suggestions of different types of workshops you can do. You can do contextual observation that I love. It's like when you go deep into the field and see people doing whatever they do in the problem space you're trying to work. I don't know, for example, if I was doing a job in mobility, micro-mobility, I would go out in the street, sit in a bench, see people coming, looking at the electric scooters, deciding which one to take, installing the app, inserting the payment method, recurrent users. Eventually, I would approach them and ask some questions. I will try to follow some of them in their trip to see if they run into problems, like a bit creepy, I know. But so I love that part of the job. Customer journey mapping is also something that I think you're always going to come across. It's when you put in a single image the entire journey the person does to accomplish something. For example, if it's buying a used car, it's not going to start when the person opens the marketplace website. It's going to start way before. Person is going to start discussing with friends and family, maybe I should buy a new car. They're going to start Googling electric cars to understand if they make sense, if there are incentives. I don't have a garage, how can I charge it? So they're going to Google a lot of stuff related to the problem they're trying to solve. The sooner you get to them, the better it is to keep them along the journey. I also love doing this. I love putting the users, the future users, to work for me. So I just print the templates, I put them on walls, and I guide them through the process. I ask them, tell me every single step you can remember when you did first thoughts of buying a car. And then put them in order. And then tell me how you felt in each one of these post-its. And then in the end, they're going to have a ton of ideas, free ideas, of how to improve their own journey. And some of them you're going to use, some of them are going to be garbage, some of them are going to be stupid, but it's a lot of value, almost for free. I mean, I normally pay them, but it's symbolic in consideration of the value they bring. After this, you need to define priorities. So you're eventually going to need to start prototyping something. So you need to prioritize not only in terms of features, but exactly what you're trying to solve. Different ways to do this again. You can do like a framework like this, high impact, effort and impact. You can do innovation and cost. You can mix and match. The important thing here is to keep into focus that it's all mostly a balance between risk and reward. So if there are some ideas that no one is doing, that's basically innovation, right? If there's no one doing it in the market, and if it's very low cost, low effort to try, you should try like probably half a dozen of those at least, because if they work, it's very likely that they're going to have a big impact in your conversion, in the usability of your product, in the desirability of your product. If they don't work, the cost was low. So even when you're prototyping, success really depends. Here you need to start also thinking about the product in the future when you want to start building it. For me, core to your success is building the unnegotiable. So you need to find out whatever that is. And for everything else, you need to find a different way of doing it. So basically, you're down to what? You can either, imagine you want to travel in hyperspace, right? So you can either buy a spaceship, you can build your own spaceship, or you can adapt a spaceship. So with more or less style. So really think about it. There are companies doing basically anything you can imagine if you Google. Sometimes you can find companies that don't do exactly what you need, but you can persuade them to do what you need. Sometimes with a financial incentive if you're a big corporate, or else with an incentive of growing their business and their exposure in the future, right? I can give you a quick example. In the case of the marketplace I did, we really wanted people, when they put their car for sale, to have all the extras filled up automatically. We couldn't find anyone in the market that was able to deliver this, but we did found someone that treated the data for engine, number of doors, car color for insurance companies. We started talking to them, and with some kind of incentive, we persuaded them to treat all the data from over 20 car manufacturers and deliver us the entire extras equipment of a car down to the color of the seats automatically. So that was pretty cool. Avoid expensive rework. When you start prototyping, start very simple. Sometimes just do it in a piece of paper to see if the flow seems right. Then evolve to low fidelity. Don't spend time on copy. Don't spend time on aligning everything. Then move on to medium to high fidelity, work the branding, see if that influences the magic moment. Magic moment for me is like when someone starts using your product, the first time you capture a smile on their face. If they never smile, the product still sucks, and you need to keep working at it, basically. Move to interactive prototypes. When you get to interactive prototypes, a big mistake I keep seeing, don't just draw the perfect flow of the application. Like sometimes people will misclick and go back to the menu, go back to the home screen. If they do this, sometimes something catches their eye and they want to click something else. You should be prepared for that. Even if eventually it leads to a blank screen saying to be designed in the future, you still get knowledge from the person trying to click on something that doesn't exist. And if this happens 2 or 3 times, I go back and I ask my UI designers, yeah, let's do a version of this screen because people are clicking it. So let's try to find out what the hell what's catching their eye, what are they looking for, right? Also, I mean, there's a lot of talk about low code, right? But actually nowadays you have a lot of solutions based on no code. And I really think after the interactive prototypes, it's a great way to validate, and sometimes not only validate. There are companies out there that raised hundreds of millions of euros, and their product was entirely done on top of, for example, Bubble. So that's pretty amazing. When you're testing, user emotions matter a lot. Try to keep in mind, try to record not only the interaction of the person, but also at least their upper body. Like their hand movements can show a lot of hesitation, for example. That's important for you to understand if things are queer or aren't queer. When you're user testing, normally you're doing it inside a white room with no noise. People will use your product in the toilet, in public transport. There are going to be distractions. So any type of hesitation already shows that the journey can be somewhat improved. And when you have a product, you start having a ton of things that you can measure. And it's very easy for like your heads to be blown away. I mean, you have a small team, you're just starting. How can you measure all this stuff, right? And I mean, in the beginning, try to focus in 1, 2, 3 indicators that you really believe that will help you. Once you manage the measurement and analysis of those ones, start adding more indicators slowly in a rhythm that you can absorb them and treat them. Like, there's no point in having 10 indicators if your team doesn't have time to analyze 10 indicators. Most important question that you should ask at any moment in time is, what's the next thing that I can do with the least amount of work? So what's the biggest question I have? And what's the easiest way of validating that? And it's not, you don't want to be 100% sure of anything, because you can't be 100% sure of anything anyway. So you want to find something that will help you get a little bit more validation. And my opinion is, the smallest the step, the better, because more steps, it's always better. You're probably gonna ask the wrong questions a lot. So if the step is small, the pain of asking the wrong question was like insignificant. If the question is very long and complicated, you're gonna spend 2 weeks answering a question, and then you go back and, yeah, shit, it was a wrong question. So to finish, just remember, design is messy. It's not like the process I showed you. It's not like a roadmap. You're gonna keep jumping back and forward. And that's all I had for you today. Thank you very much. Thank you. We have time for questions, if anyone has any. No?
Hi. I noticed there's no lean business canvas, no assumptions, no MVPs or MVTs. Minimal viable test. So, yeah, that's it. What's the reason?
Okay. So, once you get... This is funny. I should try to do this backwards. So, okay, when you get to the vision and strategy part, yeah, it's important that you start thinking on how the business side is going to fit all this that you're imagining. Although, to be honest, to me, I really try to not think a lot on how I'm going to make money and charge for the product, the solution I'm making, until I get the minimum, I don't know, a reasonable amount of good feedback from the prototypes. So I believe it's a waste of time for me to be thinking about the business model if I don't have a clear path of people enjoying the experience. Or if I'm not solving something first, I don't see why I should be thinking about how to make money out of it. But obviously, like I said previous to this slide, when you start, you have an initial pitch of the business side, right? So they have certain objectives, and you need to keep that in mind. And for example, with the bank that did Pisca Pisca, their question was, we do a lot of car loans, and we want to get closer to customers. So a marketplace was kind of an obvious reason. So we went with a marketplace. We did some cool features into it. But in the end, to this day, and 3 years have passed, for example, Pisca Pisca doesn't charge for ads of cars. And that's the most common business model for a used car marketplace. And Pisca Pisca still doesn't charge for that. It makes money with cross-selling, lead generation. So, I don't know. Hope that helps. Yes?
What would you say is the most common mistake that first-time founders designing a product make?
I think normally they already have a challenge. Somehow they went, I don't know, they found a challenge in their day-to-day, a friend, some industry they worked before, and they saw the problem existed. So sometimes, I would say, most of the times the challenge they identified is valid, it exists. I think they jump very quickly from this to prototyping. And I also believe they jump very quickly from prototyping, interactive prototypes, low quality, low fidelity prototypes, they jump very quickly to, yeah, I'm going to prototype and validate, but with coding. I'm going to have a backend from the get-go. So we start with the backend and we start to integrate APIs. And okay, now I'm validating. But it's a big step if you do that, right? You're spending a lot of hours, and maybe then it wasn't the right backend. Maybe even the technology didn't pick the right one, and you could have found a partner that would have delivered you half of the product immediately. So yeah, I think it's that. They jump very quickly from the challenge to the first prototype, and they tend to prototype things in a very complex way, and I think they should have done it. They could do it in like 1 month. This process that's here, I've done it this entire process in a week, and I've done this entire process in 3 months. It depends on the scope of the project. You can clearly do this in a week. Like, you spend the first 1 or 2 days Googling, setting up interviews with friends, family, people you cross around the street. You spend 1 day focused, half a day, defining, conceptualizing things, having ideas. You spend 2 days prototyping. On the last afternoon, you go out, you do some validation, you do a quick report on Saturday, and then on Monday, you're like, okay, are we on the right track? Do you want to make it longer now? It depends on the pressure you have, but you always learn something. Like, if you do this, you always learn stuff.
First time you should do something raw, like it's not supposed, I think, to do something very, because it's an iterative process, so you try to do something raw, and people that need to try and to experiment, and those impressions that you said before, how they interact with the prototype and how they give you more ideas for you to get a better version of the final product. So I think I agree with you. You shouldn't be spend a lot of effort the first time you are prototyping. I think it's the base idea that you are saying, or not?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Also, when you start having code, or at least some kind of product that actually is a product, a web app or a website, or there's a lot of stuff that you can fake, right? So there's a lot of stuff that if it really doesn't need to be real time, you can fake a lot of things that look automatic, but in reality there's someone in the back end doing the work. Even when it's something so simple as some data sets that need to go into a database, and maybe you didn't have time to put all the validations in the field, so some people will input their address in a way that you don't have the automated process to put that in a different database. Someone will just copy-paste and do it manually. I mean, it's not as if in the first week you're going to have 1,000 users. I mean, if you do that, that's amazing. But normally that doesn't happen like that. So you have some time to fake it. Everything should start as a manual process, I think. I don't know. That's my opinion again. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon.